Tell me, Doctor, do you like the circus?
You saw the previously released Batman, and it amounted to simply just 4 that we've already seen coming from the multiverse of movie interpretations of the Caped Crusader. Now it's time to cover the other 2 that make up the 6th Batman set, and arguably the 2 that are probably the most attractive features to the 6-pack collection. The reason for why so many people are vying for this set is because you're getting 2 brand new figures for arguably the worst regarded Batman in movie history, as far as the actors that played him, as far as the movies they starred in, and in an ironic twist, they might actually be making for some pretty modest McFarlane figures. Gonna start with the Kilmer Batman from Batman Forever, and it's specifically utilizing the sonar suit, which is really curious because it seems like so many toy lines, whether it be in the 7-inch scale like McFarlane or even in the 1/6 movie masterpiece scale like Hot Toys, they often vie for the sonar suit and not the majority of the screen time suit. So the static one that kind of resembles that of Clooney, only with the filled in symbol, the bent nipples in the crotch, etc. Instead, they often resort to the sonar suit. I don't know why, because amongst the 2 different suits that were predominantly featured in Batman Forever, I feel like I'd go for the classic muted black with the yellow symbol in the center there, the much more Tim Burton-esque suit with, of course, the little modifications that Joel Schumacher recommended for the suit to feel alive and look alive and look like it's breathing and very, very organic. He was kind of weird when he was describing the suits. I don't know why he was utilizing those terms, but similar traits are still carried on over to the sonar suit, and even though it's not necessarily my preferred suit out of the 2 that were featured in this movie, it still actually looks pretty decent here in McFarlane toy form. They were able to nail the color scheme. It's got that iridescent kind of blue with the shading, the chrome effect kind of reflecting on the sheen of the rubberized plastic utilized here. A little bit too flat here on the chest area. I kind of wish that they would have beefed them up just a little bit here where you have the bat symbol embossed on top of it. And sadly, because of the flattening, the nipples were in fact a casualty out of the chest, but then you kind of navigate down and you start to see more characteristics lifted from the version that was utilized at the end of the movie, with the gold on the symbol in the middle of the utility belt, the little webbings and ovals and little cutouts kind of symbolizing the abs. You see an awful lot of the cutouts showing the quote-unquote musculature here underneath on the thigh area, the biceps, etc. So you still have so many different characteristics that definitely resemble that suit. The actual spikes on there are very resemblant. You know, they're kind of glued together, but that's just a preference that I'm kind of against when it comes to this suit in the movie. So they did still an adequate job of replicating it there. And you even have the symbols there on the top of the gauntlets, you know, being a little gaudy with, you know, I'm Batman. So you're going to see it on the gauntlets, on the boots, on the rims of the Batmobile. Oh my God, that just made me realize, McFarlane, if you guys can give us a Batmobile from the Batman Forever, I would greatly appreciate that, because as unorthodox as that design is, I actually really did like that look of the Batmobile, so I would not mind a 1/10 scale or 1/12 scale of that bad boy. Though taking a hard look at the legs, it does seem like mine were assembled just a little weird. The right one looks like it's pretty on point, but it's actually the left one that feels like the lower part of the leg, not so much the thigh, but this area around the boot, the lower shin area, was kind of adjusted and pinned into the knee joint in a slight angle, so it looks kind of like it's angling this way. I kind of wish that the leg was a little straighter. So if any of you own the 6-pack and have gotten their hands on the Kilmer version, then please let me know if this is also an issue that's plaguing yours, because it looks like the shin on the right is facing forwards, but the one on the left is actually a little bit at an angle. And even though it still doesn't do too much to hinder the experience of getting the feet flat and pretty based and solid, so that when it comes to standing or any form of posing, it doesn't impede that, it still looks a little awkward when taking the optics into account. But speaking of those optics, like I said, the actual texturing of the suit and the way that it feels in hand actually feels pretty quality, and again, it complements that reflective sheen that is pretty faithful to the way that this suit looked like at the end of the movie. Whether or not you liked it because of how against type it is for Batman, that really falls onto you. If I was to have such a protest, it would actually be the cloth cape, because even though the premium decision to include a cloth cape is pretty appreciated, not just for this Batman, but for all 6 included in the set, I feel like this is probably the only figure, whether it's a reissue or a brand new portrayal like this one, where it actually goes against the figure rather than favoring it, because his cape was not very clothy in the movie. It was actually much more latexy and rubberized. Some, like I said, would argue that it's probably not the most efficient cape for Batman to have, but it would actually have been better to have included a plastic or rubberized cape here in this version versus that of a cloth. And then on top of that, if you're going to throw in a cloth cape, have the color kind of match, because this time it is in fact another cloth cape in black, similar to that of the rest of the Batman in the set. And it kind of goes a long way to stand out, but not necessarily in the fondest of light, because it just kind of gives me the message that, oh, okay, you guys had leftover capes and just attached it to the Kilmer Batman. I would have been happy with just meeting in the middle and maybe not going with the rubberized cape, because even though that would have favored the figure a little bit better due to the context of the suit itself being very rubbery and latexy and shiny, I would have accepted a cloth cape, but have it be the same color as this blue, or even a dark navy blue, like a very saturated navy blue. Just have it be the same material, just go with a different fabric that's just a hue much bluer, still dark but bluer, and it would have matched this figure much better than a straight up black one, because like I said, this just gives me the optics, the message that you guys just had some extra cloth capes and just attached it to this one, and that would have gone a long way to just kind of given this figure a much more distinct identity versus the Clooney over here, which we'll get to in a second. I also wasn't particularly swooned when I noticed that said cape was being held together pretty feebly by the little clips here, which are very distinct to that of the Batman Forever suit, but they were holding onto this cape for goddamn dear life. The way that it was actually coming apart here, it was almost very thin, to the point where I was like, is this thing about to come off my figure and I'm gonna have to get like a customized cape or something? But thankfully, kind of yanking it ever so slightly to the sides right here and kind of dripping it over the shoulders as best as possible, and then kind of folding it onto its side like so, did a good job of not only masking the little pinpoints here on the shoulders, but also making the cape look a lot more natural than it did before. Because initially it looked, like I said, a very it almost looked like legitimately like a string coming down here in the middle, so a little bit of futzing is going to be required on the cape when you take it right out of the box. But at least in doing so, it led me to discover the greatest feature of this figure, which has to be that head sculpt. Not only were they able to get the cowl sculpted very accurately with, like I said, the little ridges here on the side of the ears to resemble that of the Sonar suit, the way that it's all chiseled out here on the brow, the glistening of the, like I said, the reflective pattern of the blue. But then you get to that Val Kilmer likeness. I don't know if maybe they were able to strike a deal with Kilmer himself or his agent or the estate, whatever, but man, that is exactly like him in the McFarlane 7-inch scale. I mean, he's even got like the poutier lips. You know, Kilmer has those distinct lips where like the upper one is a little bit more full than the bottom one, and he kind of has like a little bit of a poutiness to the overall mouth plate. And you can see the eyes actually kind of painted in rather well inside of the hole for the eyes. And just all throughout, I can look at this face and distinctly go, yeah, that is in fact Kilmer right there. It doesn't look off or disconcerting or anything like that. That, combined with overall the little nuances and details to get the costume right, I would say that yes, you may feel some type of way on a subjective level of whether or not you kind of vibe with the Sonar suit, but in McFarlane toy form, this has no business being this accurate, and the articulation has no business being this good either. The head is able to rotate fully 360 degrees on the joint itself, as well as being able to tilt downwards and upwards very generously. Side to side is also pretty good, pretty surprisingly, considering that this is one of the more rigid cowls that we've ever seen on the big screen for Batman, so that's actually pretty remarkable. But unlike Keaton, he doesn't look terribly skinny. They were actually able to girth out the neck a little bit more favorably here to make it look much more natural, but still not compromising that joint, so that is pretty great step in the right direction. Then we get to the shoulders, where you can see right here that you have quite a bit of separation with the panels, but that thankfully favors mobility greatly. Not only do you have the cloth cape getting out of the way to allow vertical rotation 360 degrees right there, but extension is really good. And you even have great amount of swiveling with the butterfly motion right there, thanks to the way that it's all pretty flexible within this cutout. I almost want to be bold enough. I would say that if we get a couple, just like 2 or 3 more Batman releases throughout the year with this exact kind of formula or engineering when it comes to the shoulders, in terms of proportions, in terms of making sure that the washers are not too thick so that they're not hindering the experience, I want to say McFarlane may have figured out the code for the right shoulder joint to make sure that all this mobility is happening, because it doesn't feel terribly loose, terribly tight, very fluid. It just, to me, it hits the right mark. And thankfully that's found on both shoulders there, as well as, like I said, extension, even though it could maybe go a little higher than the shoulder, but to where it actually reaches, it's pretty good. You then get the bicep joint that is fully able to rotate 360, 2 joints at the elbows that are fully able to bend all the way up and are slightly ratcheted so you can actually hold them in place very firmly. And then of course the wrist joint that is able to rotate right there, as well as being able to move inwards and outwards. And then we get to the torso joint, where for the general gist of it, you do have really good rotation, albeit with a little bit of a catch. You have the torso, mid-torso cut right there that allows full rotation, 360 degrees as soon as you get the cape out of the way. And then really good extension towards the back. Good crunching towards the front, much better than some other Batman have actually had in the past, but I would have liked it to have gone just a little further. And the reason for why that is not so much the mid-torso, but rather the waist. The waist doesn't crunch forward as much as some other waist joints have been able to do so, especially recent reviews have showcased, but extension to the back is still pretty good, especially to showcase the nice abs right there, the cutout chiseled abs, the chiseled physique going on right there, as well as good crunching from side to side right about right there, so you get an awful lot of mobility there. But when it comes to rotation of the waist, it is a little bit on the stiffer side. Plus, this leads me to another little nitpick that I did have that I almost forgot to mention. Right out of the box, something that just kind of slapped me in the face was that bat crotch, just like it did in the movie when he's suiting up and we get that badass just showing up on screen. Hey, don't knock at me, don't look at me all sus. Joel Schumacher put that shot in the scene. But I will admit that this brought to my attention that the diaper is a little bit on the bigger side. I do think that they might have been able to reduce the width, or at least the expansionness vertically, of the diaper to have looked a little better on Kilmer and still be able to retain an awful lot of the details and articulation that happen along this area. And as you can see, the legs can extend towards the front, but they become a little hindered when you get to about that angle. Slight mobility towards the back, right about right there, typical for McFarlane, and then extension towards the sides. It's almost at an even 180, and even though the diaper is kind of in the way, it is still rubberized, made out of this like flexible rubberized plastic or rubber piece that is able to still flex and move to the joints so that you're able to achieve that mobility. Then we get to the knees that are fully able to bend all the way up, though mine's were just a little bit on the robust side, and like I mentioned before, I do feel like the lower part of the left leg was assembled in a very awkward angle, so that whenever I bend the knees, it really does feel like I'm bending at an angle. Like I said, it might just be mine, but I would really love to hear from some of you who have managed to have gotten your hands on the six-pack. Let me know, does your Kilmer happen to have this thing happening with it? Nevertheless, I am pleased to report that those ankle joints that I really like, that are flush with the body and the boot design, are still there. So they are ratcheted, moving up and down on the ankle, as well as allowing rotation on 2 points towards the top and towards the bottom. And the toesies are still found there, though they don't move as high up as I would have wanted, but they are still pretty functionable nonetheless. So overall, really good, simple but effective articulation, really good attention to detail as far as the way that the suit is assembled, though I have, like I said, my qualms and overall little details and happenstance that I would have rather have changed, specifically the cape. I feel like out of all of them, the cape is the big one, and like I said, I wouldn't have overhauled it or done anything too costly to the assembly process. I just would have changed the color. Just change the color to this blue, still have it be fabric, still have it be the same material, the same cut, the same thing, the way the stitching is here towards the bottom, just have it be blue. And that would have made a remarkable difference to make this guy stand out even better. But overall, I would say that for the Kilmer Batman and the first interpretation we have before he imminently gets a standalone release, part of the Batman Forever wave, I would say that this is still a welcome addition to the six-pack. So that now brings us to Clooney, arguably the worst Batman in the entire cinematic history of the Caped Crusader. And what an ironic twist of fate that he is probably my favorite out of the two new figures that are included in this set. Yeah, spoilers, I actually might like this guy better than Kilmer that I just covered. And I just gave a high rating and a high enough amount of praise because Clooney here, not only does he have a cape that kind of matches his color scheme just a little better, but there's just something about the uniformity and the consistency of the color scheme working in favor of the suit here that not only do I prefer, like I mentioned before, this is more so the suit that he was using for the majority of the movie before he finally settles on his own version of the Sonar suit with the silver and the suit that was basically designed to sell toys. I know we're being a little meta here, but basically that the final suits for both Forever and Batman and Robin were literally noted in by the studio, Warner Brothers, to sell toys. They weren't like a tactical thing. They weren't baked into the story. It was literally Warner Brothers saying, hey, we need to sell toys, so can you throw in this suit? And that was literally it. So I'm personally a little bit more happy that McFarlane opted to have this version of the suit for Clooney because I think it's the cleaner looking one. Yeah, it doesn't have the yellow filled into the middle symbol here, but it's the one that's a bit more consistent and flushes in better with the rest of the suit. You have the smaller circular symbol. You got the bat nipples. The bat nipples are present, so we can definitely not burn the town down, not burn McFarlane Toys headquarters in Vegas down, because we finally got our bat nipples. But then we have so many other little attributes of the suit that work very well in 7-inch format, because you have the abs, you have the alien looking design to the obliques, you have the belt right here that's clipping here in the center with yet another bat symbol, and then once again the muscular kind of texture happening with the thighs, the crotch piece, which unlike Kilmer is much smaller. It's not perfect, it's still a little bit on the girthier side, but it definitely fleshes better with the rest of the mold than the Kilmer one was. The Kilmer, like I said, was a little bit on the abrasive side. This one I feel flushes just a tad better, not the best, but better. And then much like with the original Kilmer, you do have once again much more bat signals happening here on the shins of the boots. But similar to that of Kilmer and even the Keaton, you have McFarlane kind of replicating that clothy look or that fabric look to the texture of the surface happening here on the boots, the gauntlets, the inwards part of the forearms, and even a little bit around the shoulder area. So overall, there's just something very simplistic yet really still badass looking about the suit. And if that wasn't enough, we then get the cowl, which does have I guess you could say the outgoing ears that I was never the biggest fan of. I never liked how his ears are kind of protruding out on the cowl for the live action version of the suit. But if it means that we're getting some not only solid work on the eyes that are painted and then kind of flushed in and kind of pushed in to kind of give it a little bit of depth happening there, you then get that really good likeness of Clooney. Again, it's not perfect. You have a little bit of misalignment happening with the painting of the lips, but I'm very surprised that they were able, again, it could be maybe Clooney was a good sport and signed over his likeness, or maybe they were just able to strike this really defining balancing act to where they were able to do something weird with the upper lip to not make it 100% Clooney, but still nail that chin, because Clooney has a very distinguishable chin. He has a really strong jawline, very much built for Batman, for the cowl, but then he has a very rounded chin that stands out. That his chin is so iconic that it's actually a little insulting that people can't look at Batman and go, isn't that Bruce Wayne? Because that's his chin. You know, it's got that rounded bit right there. Like, they can't look at Bruce Wayne out in public with Clooney's chin and then look at Batman and be like, I think that's him. Like, it's just Clooney with the cowl. You know, that's why whenever he appeared in the posters, I'm like, it's just George Clooney in the Batsuit. That's it. It's not Batman. It's Clooney in the Batsuit. And here he is in miniaturized format, because I feel like that cowl in this head sculpt is able to nail that. Though, regardless of how faithful it is to the version we saw on screen, not every detail on the figure is going to be able to nail it. And to me, I would feel like the biggest problem would have to be the little clips that are holding the cape in place, because even though it does work much more favorably here for Clooney's figure than that of Kilmer, especially with the way of how thinned out the cloth is to where it's kind of wrapping itself towards, I don't know, for some reason the way that it's kind of wrapping itself here around the shoulder definitely works much better to be on-screen accurate than that of Kilmer's or even any of the other Batman. The only problem I have are going to be these little clips, because even though it's supposed to kind of resemble that illusion that the clips are holding the cape in place, they are just so thin and frail on the plastic here that I can easily see my finger, my hand, I don't know, something kind of brazing the surface here along the shoulder, just a small little tap. And these things, especially as time goes on and they become a little weaker, they're going to come off. Mark my words, I'll probably post some kind of shorts update here on the channel, but somehow, some way, I can't shake the feeling that these little clips, because of how tiny and how they're hanging on for dear life via the molded plastic here on the bottom side of the cowl, they're gonna come off. So do be careful when you get your Clooney. And be even extra careful when you're handling the figure and messing around with the articulation, which, much like Kilmer's, is pretty awesome. Too awesome to the point where I'm starting to think that we are starting to replicate certain parts here, but at least they were able to change enough, especially since you're taking into account that both movies were directed by Schumacher and he had input on the suit, so it kind of makes sense here. I'm actually willing to not be too judgmental to say, oh, they're repeating body parts and using the same buck. Here it kind of fits. So the only real thing that they needed to have changed for sure is the head sculpt and a few of the little details that make up the superfluous or superficial details of the suit, as far as like the bat symbol, the belt, the way that the abs are constructed. But as far as the construction of the limbs and the articulation itself, I did expect it to be somewhat identical, but as long as it works, I'm happy with that, and thankfully it does. The head is able to fully rotate 360 just like before. Tilting up and down is also pretty good. Tilting side to side, maybe it's the way that the sculpt is generated this time around for the head, because of the way that the cowl is slightly different, especially to be acclimating to the proportions of Clooney's chin. But for some reason, tilting is not as good as that of Kilmer's, but you know, a small little price to pay for the likeness. Then we get onto the shoulders, which are quite frankly identical to that of Kilmer's, and as such, they are able to rotate vertically 360, extend towards the side pretty favorably, and then the shoulder rotation or the butterfly movement does happen very firmly, but also not too firm, not too tight, not too loose either. Very good balance in between both movements and both forms of motion, so that's pretty awesome. And it even gives them a little bit of added kind of musculature happening alongside the shoulders, so when you pose them like this can actually look like an intimidating Batman, despite the fact that he comes from the movie that he did. Nevertheless, the biceps are still able to rotate in place 360 degrees, though mine were a little on the tighter side, so do be careful when moving yours around, especially since this could come at the risk of warping or doing something really weird with the joints, so do use your fingers and make sure that you don't break anything. But then you also get two joints at the elbow that are fully able to bend all the way up and are much more firm and ratcheted than that of Kilmer's. You can even kind of hear them click a little bit, so those are pretty good in place. And then the wrist joint is also able to move the fists all the way around 360, as well as being able to move inwards and outwards. Then we get to the torso, which ideally is about the same as Kilmer's. You got the mid-torso and the waist that are working in favor of crunching and extending towards the back, as you can see right there. When it comes to rotation, however, it's a little bit more limited, mainly because they were able to, I guess you could say, add a little bit of extra plastic just to define the musculature happening alongside the torso here to be faithful to the version of the suit. But the trade-off is that even though the mobility for 360 degree horizontal movement is technically there, it's really, really snug to the point where mine actually gets kind of stopped when you get to that degree right about right there. So I'm not going to force it, especially since this is in fact the only certifiable way to get your own Clooney right now, at least until the standalone or the Build-A-Figure, the Build-A-Bane version comes out and finally starts to hit shelves. Until then, I don't want to risk it. This is my only unit. I'm going to keep it this way, going to keep it safe, so I'm going to make sure not to straddle the line too much when it comes to the articulation, but just take note of that. Same thing goes for the waist, although I do feel like the waist can fully, yes it can, despite the diaper piece, it can fully rotate 360 and slightly, like I said, incline towards the sides, front and back, so some extra mobility is still found there, and it's still pretty good, despite, like I said, not being able to fully rotate 360. The mid-torso still does wonders, as does the top leg joints are still able to move to the front about that far. I would even argue much further than that of Kilmer's because the crotch piece or the diaper piece is a little smaller. Moving towards the back is a little less slight than that of Kilmer's, only because even though I just said that the diaper piece is a little smaller than that of Kilmer's, I want to say that the butt area is overlapping just a little bit more, so it does restrict that a tad. But extension towards the sides, it's about the same, almost the 180-degree angle right about right there. And the two knee joints are fully able to bend all the way up, and they don't feel as kind of askew as that of Kilmer's because, again, that weird assembly happening with either of the legs is not really happening too much here, so both are able to bend and are slightly ratcheted. But the rest of the legs follow the same pattern. You have the ankle joints that are like flush with the rest of the body, vertically cut in the middle, so you're able to bend them down and up and are ratcheted and very firm, and are able to rotate horizontally at the top and the bottom 360 degrees. Toesies are found there and are, in my opinion, a little bit more fluid than that of Kilmer's, but they don't bend as high, so you do have a little bit of a trade-off there. So yeah, so many different things, but it ever takes the lead by a couple of notches, mainly because of the faithfulness of the cowl, the way that the cape is able to complement it just a little better, and just, in my opinion, the preferential treatment I will give the Clooney suit here because of the simplistic and uniform look of the color scheme. But Clooney and Kilmer are not the only two brand new additions, brand new anything that are included inside of this 6-piece Ultimate Movie set. Introducing the Bat Signal accessory. Basically, the freebie you get with the set because it's priced at $120. Let's say each figure is about $20. 6 figures, that's 120. So basically, the trade-off you get for not having any of the accessories that come with those respective Batman, because I'm fully expecting them to get their own standalone releases, and when they do, or if they already have them, they come with a grapple, a batarang, or such. This time, they didn't come with any of that, but instead, all of that retooling, all of that extra work and plastic went into this signal, which, frankly, I really don't mind. I'm not complaining. I'm just kind of making an observation, because this Bat Signal is pretty cool looking. It's not exactly the most premium, it's a little bit on the light side, but at the same time, it doesn't feel cheap or, badly assembled. It still feels pretty good as far as, like I said, something that's kind of tossed in to commemorate the Batman. I do like the little gargoyles here on the side. I honestly I didn't know what they were, to be quite honest. When I saw pictures of them, I'm like, what are those things? Are they meant to be like spotlights or adjustable little grips or something? But then closer inspection, I looked and I saw that, yeah, they are gargoyles, so that's pretty neat. And I do like that the influence behind the Bat Signal is kind of an amalgamation of different styles and influences of the different Bat Signals we've seen throughout the course of history, or at the very least cinematic history. I would probably argue that this resembles much closer the Zack Snyder Bat symbol that we saw in BVS, but at the same time, like I said, there's a cleaner look to the base as well as the handle and everything that's kind of gripping the center portion here of the signal itself that I feel is a much more neutral look to kind of, like I said, blend in with either of the Batman that you want to pose next to it. And as you can see right here, I have the plate that resembles the, I guess we can call it the Burton symbol, because this is not only fit for Keaton, but it's also fit for Kilmer and Clooney, since all three of them boasted the same symbol for the Bat Signal, especially since Tim Burton was executive producer on all 4 of those movies. But should you want to pose the Bat Signal with, let's say, the Bale Batman, all you have to do is just give it a firm tug here towards the top to remove this little lid part right here. It is, like I said, a little on the snug side. Okay, yeah, we're good. Yeah, like I said, it's just a rim, a plastic rim right here that's kind of holding it all together, but it fits pretty tightly right here on the little grips because there are little tabs holding it in place right here. And when you remove it, you can then kind of reach in. There's a little cutout right here to put your finger through and remove this plastic piece, translucent piece that's holding the symbol in place, and replace it with one of the other 3 symbols that are included, which I think is a really awesome feature. As soon as I saw this in the promo pics, I'm like, this is a given. This is a given. We all, in some capacity, need this as Batman fans, as McFarlane fans. And so let's say you want the Bale one. You simply just take it, put it in place, fit the notches and the tabs in place to make sure that it's not falling out. And then simply just take the plastic rim, place it back on there, pop it in place, like so. And then towards the back, upon removing the little piece of paper that was kind of holding it in place, you remove that. You have the battery compartment right here towards the top that can be accessed via a screwdriver. But thankfully, batteries are already included. You simply just take the switch, flip it on, rotate it, and there is the bat signal. And it is articulated here on this little handle that's holding it in place. And it is ratcheted, so it kind of fits on like 2 or 3 points of articulation, to the point where you can almost rotate it a full 360, but it kind of stops right about right there. So going down stops there, then flipping towards the back, it kind of stops right about right there. So you have almost a full 180-degree angle of being able to aim the bat symbol in place. But most of us are generally going to have it at about right there. So not all the way towards the top. I want to say 2 notches down, and that's probably where it looks at its best. And you can see right there that in terms of luminance, it looks pretty good head on. But if you're expecting a really strong beam to actually have the symbol be placed like on a screen or a wall or anything like that, yeah, you're barking up the wrong tree, rather. The light is most definitely not very strong. And like I said, what are you really going to expect with a freebie like this? And between the construction of the signal itself versus the luminance or the strength of the beam itself of the light, I would gladly take the construction of this and making sure that it's very firm and very good, well, and put together, instead of something that's very cheap and yeah, it has a strong light, but then it kind of falls apart after a couple of months. You get what I'm saying? So I gladly take this trade-off. And furthermore, for any of you who are like engineers or very technical and like to mod things, I'm pretty certain that this is a very easy fix, because all you really have to do, like I said, turn it back off, simply just remove the lid, and you have very easy access to the actual bulb right there in the middle. So I'm pretty certain that through some finagling, you even have some screws right here to be able to remove this lid. It's almost like McFarlane said, yeah, as far as costs, we have to throw in this very weak light, but what we can also do is make sure that there is some kind of form of access to the bulb itself, so that if you want to go out of your way to put something else a little stronger in there, you're more than welcome to do so. So I do appreciate that. Sure, it kind of leans on those tendencies of McFarlane often creating really great sculpted figures, but then lacking on the paint, but then having the option there for people to paint, or if you want to buy into the sketch line and paint it in yourself, you have a little bit of a DIY kind of element. So that factors in a little bit into the symbol, but at least I am happy and content with being able to swap out the different plates so that you can have the Zack Snyder bat symbol, the Matt Reeves Robert Pattinson bat symbol with the ridges right here across the way, somewhere along the way. But for the sake of posterity and the rest of this review, I'm going to leave the default neutral, and I want to say the most used bat symbol amongst the entire franchise, which is going to be the Burton one. And there you have it, folks, concluding my comparison / review of basically all 6 movie Batman, and the one bat signal and everything included inside of the box set. Yes, you also get your 6 neutral DC Multiverse bases, which I kind of wish they would have included something to kind of distinguish them from your generic DC Multiverse black base, because it's really just a generic basis. You don't really have anything else on them. But at the same time, it makes it easy to swap them amongst the Batman, so I can't really complain too much about that. And then you also get the trading cards, which I do appreciate that not only you have tailor-made bios on the back for each of the Batman, so it's not a generic thing about Bruce Wayne losing his parents again. No, you actually have one for Pattinson being 2 years as Batman. You have the Kilmer Batman going up against Two-Face and the Riddler and talking about Chase Meridian. So I do like that they were able to pay tribute to those standalone Batman movies on the back of the card, and it really goes a long way of adding this little lenticular chrome rim around the outside part of the cards that make it feel a bit more collectible and premium. I actually feel compelled to want to display these cards versus the ones that generally come with your typical McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse figure. And it's arguably the cherry on top for the Ultimate Movie 6-pack collection here, because it's, again, one of those sets that is frankly rather unreviewable. Just like the Gold Label 2-pack, the 89 Keaton that came out with Flash, it's like if you're a fan of Batman, if you're a fan of these respective actors who played the character, or if you just want to kind of, like I said, honor the lineage of the movie cinematic franchise that was taken up by the Cape Crusader, this is ultimately the set to get. It's the reason for why it's sold out practically everywhere. It's been scalped to death. And though you might have your preferred Batman or your preferred McFarlane figure within this set that you like over the other, and you think they might have done a better job at because you didn't feel like they changed too much and you prefer the original, it's still a set where you get every figure for pretty much the standard price. You get the bat signal throw in with the additional plates to be able to swap out the symbol, the cards, the bases, and the packaging to commemorate it all in one nice set. I think it just kind of speaks for itself. Despite, like I said, a little bit of discrepancies here and there, especially with that Bale Batman that I feel is a repackage of an existing Batman. They just threw on the cape and all and just shipped it out like that. So I kind of wish that they would have paid a little bit more attention to that. And I do feel like there are some other stories out there of people getting a couple of Batman here and there inside of their sets that weren't exactly treated very fairly. All that is to say that the set favors more so value than it does necessarily the quality you get out of. If you still feel like this is too much of a pricey set, especially if you're only going for one particular Batman, especially since you already own the originals. So say, for example, you just want the Clooney, you just want the Kilmer, but you already have the other 4 Batman from the standalone releases, then simply just wait for the Batman Forever wave or the Batman and Robin wave, and you'll be settled with that. I, however, am personally content and settled with this set as is. Thank you guys so much for watching my 2-part series here covering the 4 pre-existing Batman, comparing them to the originals, and now reviewing the Kilmer and Clooney. If you guys stuck around for both videos, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. If you guys enjoyed both videos, hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down. Comment below, what are you guys' takes on the Batman 6-piece set here? Did you guys get a chance to pre-order way back when it went live? Have you guys gotten your hands on it? Did yours ship yet? Or are you in the market for finding one at a reasonable price? What has been your experience with this set, whether you actually own it or not? I want to hear you guys' tales and tribulations down in the comments. Subscribe for more McFarlane Toys figure reviews, Batman content, Spider-Man content, since those are the 2 characters that I love the most and I really want to cover in spades here on the channel, especially with Spider-Man 2 coming out, more McFarlane stuff, maybe some of those Marvel Legends that did get announced and I couldn't help but gravitate towards. Stick around for all that stuff, and as always guys, stay humble. I'll see you later.